Welcome back, writers. Today, we're going to prepare for our debates. And then at the end of class, you'll be debating with a partner. The thing that I want you to understand before we jump in is this. Don't raise your voice. Improve your argument. This is a time for us to get to have our voice be heard. All arguments are times where our voice can be heard. So make a better argument. Don't just shout. Let's check it out. Okay, so take a moment right now to take a look at these tips that we have for argument. More specifically, like moves that always pay off when we're arguing during a debate. So that first one is make a claim. And that's what we were talking about before. Like that's the big thing. You have to have a strong opinion and make a claim. And while maybe you don't feel strongly about either side, to write an argument well, you're going to have to do that. So make a claim. In the realm of competitive sports, it's either kids should be playing competitive sports or kids should not be playing competitive sports. Okay. The second one, as far as things that always work, are support your claim with reasons and evidence, like multiple pieces of evidence. It's not enough to just have one. We can find any article, any study that says this one thing. We need to find multiple pieces of evidence. We're going to have a little debate here between two Mr. Rectashles. One Mr. Rectashel is fun Mr. Rectashel. He lets students read comics instead of novels. The not fun Mr. Rectashel is the kind of Mr. Rectashel that makes you eat broccoli, that prefers dogs over cats, that, like we talked about last time, probably likes the idea of having animals at school. So, not our favorite Mr. Rectashel. However, he's going to be arguing for the idea that students shouldn't read comic books during our novel reading time, as in times where you should be reading larger books. So as we watch and listen, you should be trying to think of the moves that I make from that list we just saw about moves that always work in arguments. I say that students should not read comics during reading workshop. I say this because comics lack sufficient volume. They are not complex enough to push students to make rich, deep interpretations, and they are taking away from students reading novels. My evidence to support my first point, that comics are not long enough, comes from my research. I counted the number of pages in some comics, and most of them don't have more than 30 pages, while novels are much longer. But also, comics have many fewer words on each page than novels, so they do not support volume. I can also support the point that comics are not complex enough. Comics don't tackle the same kinds of intense life issues that novels do. I mean, Archie trying to decide whether to date Betty or Veronica? Come on. It's a waste of time to read comics. Your turn, fun Mr. Rectashel. I take the position that students should be able to read comics during reading workshop time because I'm cool, Mr. Rectashel. I say this because comics are an important genre for students to know. They can be as complex as novels, and they might help more readers access our curriculum, reading. One reason that I think students should be able to read comic books during reading workshop is because they're an important genre for students to know. Like, for example, comics have their own section at many bookstores. Also, they may have multimedia elements which give students experience in analyzing elements of non-print texts. In addition, comics are an art form which make them important works for students to know. Despite what you said about comics not being complex enough, Students should read comic books because they actually can tackle themes that are just as intense as those in novels. For example, have you read Ultimate Comics' Spider-Man? It deals with the clash of good versus evil, and with issues about identity, loss, belonging, and class. Complexity is about more than sentence and page length, and some students may not love reading novels, but may love reading comics. Students should be able to read comics during reading workshop. So, Fun Mr. Rectashel wants you and your partners to talk about what notes you wrote down about the argument moves you saw us making, the things that you think we did that were successful, and they may be on that list that we saw a minute ago. Right now, we're going to pause the video while you do that. So, after listening to our conversations, I bet there are some points that we could add to that little list I had before. So, I think that one of the big ones is respond to what your partner is saying. I know that you probably noticed Fun Mr. Rectashel brought up something that Lame Mr. Rectashel had said. I brought up the idea that Lame Mr. Rectashel claimed comic books were not complex books. And I actually refuted that. I said how that was wrong, and I explained why with details. All right, it's almost that time, the time where we've probably actually been dreading having to do this, the time where you're gonna argue with someone else. But we're gonna make it as easy on you as possible because we're gonna let you sort of plan out in your little groups that you're in the way to form your argument for either side. So here's the deal. I hope that we remember last year using our boxes and bullets structure to argue in our literary essay about the Three Little Pigs. It was in our boot camp. If you don't remember that, the main idea is we choose a structure, and it's our boxes and bullets structure. We fill it up with content about our topic. We start with that claim, and then we have 3 reasons that supported it, and that makes up our thesis statement. Then, after that, we start to create our body paragraphs, 1 for each of those reasons that we can support with the details, and then unpack with analysis, explaining how those details actually support that 1 reason. Finally, at the end, we wrapped it up by restating our claim and 3 reasons, also called our thesis statement. And what you're going to notice is that this planning it out is actually like kind of making a plan for your flash draft that is going to be due by the next time we see each other. So that means that it's time for me to say goodbye because the rest of the work is for you to do. So until I see you next time, happy writing.